Hey, good morning, good afternoon. This is Seb from Interface. Thanks for joining me in this tips and tricks session number 1 of this user conference. We're going to have a look today at some tips within Composer to hopefully make your life a bit easier and help you save some time while designing and building an interface interactive experience. So we're going to have a look at a very easy use case, building a menu with some animation, and then dive into these tips along the line. So this is the menu I'm talking about. I actually took an example from one of our customers who gave me this menu, and it's a toggle button on the top that will bring like a background panel and then 5 or more menu items with a slightly delayed kind of animation. So kind of cool effect. You can customize this as much as you want. We're going to go back into edit mode and see how to build this menu. And along the line, I will try to give you some tips that I'm using myself when I use Composer. So first of all, because I don't want to recreate everything from scratch, I'm going to grab this toggle button and then the background image and one of the buttons here, copy and paste that in my scene, and I'm going to build basically the opposite on the right hand side. So let me, okay, first tips, how to zoom a little bit on what I'm looking at right now. I'm going to hold the control key on my keyboard and use the mouse wheel. Now I can see this zooms on my menu item here. If I zoom out, move my mouse to the left and zoom in, it will always zoom where your cursor is. That is really useful when you want to go from one end to the other in your project. Along the same line, another shortcut which I use a lot, and I'm a keyboard freak, bear with me. If you prefer using buttons, you can. There's a button right down there here, this fit scene button that will just recenter on your whole scene. If you zoomed in somewhere, you can just do a Control-0 on your keyboard, and it will also bring you back to your whole scene. So Control and mouse wheel, Control-0, I use that a lot. Now, once you're zoomed in, if you want, let's say I want to move this toggle to the top right corner, but I can't see it exactly, I'm going to hold the space bar on my keyboard. You can see my mouse cursor change to a hand. Now, if I click with the left button and drag, I can drag around my scene. These are all Adobe style shortcuts that we use in Composer and we've had for quite a while now. This button, I'm going to just turn it around so it looks like it was made to go on the right hand side. I'm going to show my background here and zoom a little bit. We want this to be like here, and then my menu item, probably I want something like this. Okay. So next, copy and paste. Yeah, that sounds like the most idiot shortcut ever, but who doesn't use copy and paste? Obviously, you can always right click, copy and paste, and do see all the shortcuts here. I use a lot the duplicate, which is just a shortcut of the shortcuts. So this menu item, I want 5 of them. So I'm going to do a Control D once. You can see here on the left-hand side, I do have a new menu item, and we do increment these numbers automatically, so you don't have to rename them. To rename all of them. That doesn't change the text in your button though. So I'm going to go quickly and create number 3, number 4, number 5. And right now, I don't care much about how I'm positioning them in the scene, because in the end, I'm going to use another tips which I like a lot. I'm going to say, okay, the first one here at the top, I want it here. The last one, I want it somewhere around here. Okay. If I multi-select all my menu items, I'm holding the Shift key on my keyboard. I have the first one selected, Shift, select the last one, it selects all of them. Now I have access to these alignment tools. So I could first make sure they are all aligned horizontally on their center, and then I can distribute them vertically. So now I have exactly the same space between each individual menu items. These tools are very useful. You could also do a click and drag to select all of them, but now I have my background selected as well. So I could do a Control and just remove this one to have the same selection, or just maybe try to select just the edges here, or which is outside of the scene, and I got my menu here, my menu items. Okay, so we're good with that. Now let's have a look at the actions. So this one came with its triggers and actions, right? When I duplicated this original toggle button, I kept the same toggle button. So right now, if I click on that, I'm going to actually show the menu on the left-hand side, which I don't want. So for the exercise here and the demo, I'm going to unselect all that and recreate these animations. So we have nothing right now. We have no triggers, no actions. I'm going to add a first trigger. Remember, this is a toggle button, like a light switch on and off. So the first thing we want to do is when the menu is checked, we want to have our menu items come actually in the position they are at right now. And that's something which I've presented in the past, and I still do a lot, is to create an animation, you have an origin and a destination. And one way of doing things, I'm not saying it's the best, it's one that I do use a lot, is to position your items at their destination first and work backwards. By doing this, you can say when this toggle button is checked, I want my menu item number 6, which is going to be this one, to move into a position. And if you look here at the X and Y, this is the current position of that menu. That's our target. So I don't have to click on here and try to find another position, which now I messed with my position and I don't want that. If I want to reset these values, I can just select any other action. Usually I just take the next one and then select it again. And you can see this was reset to the current X and Y. Let me do that again. So we have, just make sure we go from the right values, 1821 and 282. If I were to change this action, doing something completely idiot like this, I have my X and Y, which are completely off compared to what I'm looking for. If I just select any other action and then come back to my move to, I'm back to the original position. Some tools would have a reset button here. We don't, right? But it's super easy. Just select another action, come back to this one, and you just reset these values, these parameters. So that's the first button. Let's go to the second one. So again, multiple ways of doing things depending on how familiar you are with the tool and the way your brain works. I'm technically not really a designer, I'm more a developer, so I have my way of working and of thinking and of trying to optimize my workflow. All solutions are good. I'm just showing you a couple of solutions. So option number 1, you just do the same thing again. So you add another action, select your item, I'm counting the clicks. You select the position, you select the move to, that's 4 clicks. That works, and just do that again 3 more times. Another way, which I prefer, and I'm not going to say it saves you a lot of time, but it's, again, my way. I would do a duplicate. Again, remember, keyboard trick. So I would do a Control D. I don't know if it's 1 click or 2 clicks. It's one shortcut. Then I need to select my new item. I don't need to select the position, size, and orientation. I don't need to select the move to because it's already good. These are the right actions. So I don't have to scroll in the structure and to remember exactly which action I need to do. Although the position is not good. Right now, my menu item 8 is using the default position of menu 7. That's not good. But remember, just select another action, come back here, and you do have the proper values. In the end, that's maybe 3 clicks instead of 4 plus a keyboard shortcut. Probably the same amount of time. For me, it's easier because usually what I do 1, 2, Control D, Control D. So I know I have 5 items. I should have 5 lines here. And then I just update 6, 7, 8. I need to do that on the 9. Reset my values. Move by, move to, I'm good. Next one. And it can become a bit repetitive here. So you don't have to think that much, at least I don't. Item 10, except if I'm explaining at the same time. All right, so we have our 5 actions. And we would need another action actually, which will be our menu background. We want to show the background, which is visible at the moment. We will hide that afterwards. Next thing is about all these actions. Click on this button. So either this show hide timeline button or this show timing and animation. These are exactly the same things. This will open this panel, which you can enlarge and give you all the options about the animations. If you already know what kind of animation you want to do at the beginning, do that first, not like I did right now, because now I need to edit my 6 animations one after the other. While I could have just reduced this to 0.2, maybe let's go with 0.3. Come on, 0.3, like this. And I need to do that on all of them. Not the easiest one, but that will do. You can edit here on the timeline or just punch in the right numbers, and then you can adjust all this. So I'm gonna go, this one is 0.1. I'm gonna go very quick, and you can again adjust. If I try to move this, I can only move by 0.1, by a tenth of a second. But you can go lower by punching in the numbers manually. So let's go with 0.13. In here, I'm gonna go with 0.16 and make sure we have a 0.3 duration. Let's go with 0.19, 0.3 duration, and 0.22 and 0.3 duration. And this would be showing the menu at the very beginning of our timeline. It can be put at the end. You can also do a move up to move it at the top, so it's a bit easier for the brain to remember in what order of these things happening. Now, I'm going to come back to this show action, but how do you test all that? Because right now, if I hit play, nothing's going to happen because the menu items are already at their destination and the background is already visible. Back to our scene, I'm going to hide this menu, and then my 5 items, I will move them to their origin, which is outside of the scene. If I go back to my trigger and action panel, and usually I will have this on my second screen, so it's I have a bit more real estate to work with. But let's try to play the animation. It's fast, but it looks like what we're trying to do. Okay. So on the show side, this one, I used here a very simple fade, but you do have a fade and zoom. Now, if I try to do it here, having this panel coming below the buttons, it doesn't look super good. So I would probably keep that to the fade. But remember, it's not only about time. You also have other kind of animation options in this panel. So just take the time to have a look at them. See what's available. Type in animation in our search box here and look at the article that gives some details about that, and just experiment, play around with all these different options. So check on the toggle button, shows all the menu items. How do we do the opposite? Again, 2 options. Add a trigger and redo everything. As you can guess, not my option, not my preferred one. If you click on the right-hand side, and you can see on this panel, the purple highlight is on the right-hand side on the actions, you can copy one action, or you can do a select all and then copy all the actions, go on another trigger and paste these actions. Or you can click either here or here on the when side, on the left-hand side of this trigger and actions combination. Make sure the purple highlight is on the left-hand side. Now, if you copy that trigger and paste it again, I'm doing it with the mouse here. You could also just do a Control-D, Control-C, Control-V for duplicate. You have twice the same trigger and all the actions have been duplicated. This trigger, just change it to is unchecked. The show will become a hide. And here we need to bring these buttons back to their original position, which happens to be the position they are at right now. So if you remember the trick we saw a bit earlier, this X value, that's when they are going inside the scene. If I just click on another action, come back to my move to 2066, that's outside of the scene. That's all I need to do. So all my 5 menu items, move by, move to, resets to 2066. I could also just select that and punch in the number, preference, 2066. Do you prefer typing on the keyboard or just doing a click and click? Up to you. And I think we're good to go. So let's center back. Control S is the keyboard shortcut I should not present anymore. File save and hit play to test our work. So on the left-hand side, that was the original one. We had this kind of animation. On the right-hand side, looks pretty similar, maybe too much room here, but adjusting the background, and obviously the image is reversed. I should have turned this around, but you get the idea. Right? So that's how you can create these animations, and using the copy and paste between assets or collections in the scene, between actions, between triggers. Copying and pasting triggers is a very powerful feature. All right, a couple of other things. We've been talking about these triggers and actions. How do you know what you have done in the past? How do you reuse something you download from our marketplace? Or if you're retrieving a project from a colleague, how do you understand what has been going on? That's why you have these little icons here in the scene structure. On our side, when I help the support team and we reverse engineer some of your projects, it is super helpful for us. But believe me, even if I go back on one of my projects that I created a few years ago and I don't remember everything, I would use this as well. So when you have a trigger, you will see this lightning bolt. If you put your mouse on top of it, you can see the trigger and all the actions associated. If you have a lot of them, you can scroll through that list. One of the things which is, obviously you can also just select it and see them on the right hand side. One of the tricks that not a lot of people know is, okay, there's an is check here and it does a lot of move to and it shows a menu background or move nav icons. What is this nav icons? How do I know what this thing is and where it is in my scene structure? Imagine you have a much more complex scene structure with lots of groups, layers, and you have to scroll quite a bit to find these things. Well, when you put your mouse over one of these actions, if I were to click here, it would select the action and open the triggers and actions panel. That's not what I want to do. If I put the mouse over the action target, you can see now it becomes blue. And the mouse cursor actually changed to a finger kind of style. When it's blue like this, if you click on that, it's going to select the object in your scene structure. If your object is not locked, like this, it will show you the handles on the scene and you can easily locate it on the scene. If you had some other actions on this, then you can go and cascade and understand, okay, this is showing this is moving this object, and you can go and analyze exactly what's going on among your triggers and actions. This is also true when you have bindings. Let's say this button here, I'm going to bind its Y value to the original button which we have on the left. Okay. So now if I take this button on the left and I move it, you can see the one on the right hand side is moving at the same time. Now, in addition to the lightning bolt, you do have this little bullet here that shows the bindings. Again, put your mouse over this. You can see the binding. So this nav1 button is getting its Y value from the Y value of the nav period button. And you see again, it's blue. If you click on that, it will actually select it in your scene structure, and you can reverse engineer and analyze all that. So a lot of things about triggers and actions, copy and paste, and trying to understand exactly what's going on within your experience. The last tip I want to share is to use buttons or toggle buttons to aggregate these kind of actions. So right now we have a menu, so obviously the menu is in charge of everything, but let's say you wanted to use an RFID tag. Let's say you have an Exmosphere component, and then when you lift an object, you want to show this menu. When you put the object back, you want to hide the menu.
Again, two options. Let's add a trigger. You receive a command, you actually happen to know which command it is that you want to use. You do the conditions. I'm not going to focus on that, but let's say when you receive that command, you want to show your menu. You could paste all the actions here and make sure they're exactly the same. And if your graphic designer asks you to, hey, change this 0.3 seconds to 0.25, you'd have to do that again in the both triggers on the button and on the next sphere. You don't want to do that. Instead, you can say, when this next sphere command arrives, when my object is lifted, I want to do exactly the same thing as if I had checked this toggle button. And you can do that. You can select your toggle button, and on the toggle button category, you can say check. Now you are cascading the triggers and actions. When I lift the object, I check the button. Because I have this check trigger, it's going to move my menu in. You can do the same thing on a different command, doing the uncheck. When I have these external sensors, Nexmosphere, RFID, whatever, that I cannot always test with my laptop if I'm on the go and I cannot test all that, I would usually add some buttons outside of the scene, which I would call let's say a show menu that would do the same thing as the actions we have on the side. And maybe I would have a hide menu. Let me rename this one. Hide menu. And so when I test, I would either just drag and drop this on my scene, hit play, and test my work. That's one way. And then after I've tested that, I need to remember, hey, I need to move this thing outside. So when I publish it and send it to the customer, he doesn't see these buttons in play mode. Or I like to create a kind of group. Usually I would put that in a layer to organize my stuff, but we are going to hit the timeline here of the session. And I would use a toggle button to move this group up and down, to move it here with all my debug buttons, my test buttons in the scene, and then add a key press on the scene itself. When I press, usually I like to use my spacebar. So when I press my spacebar, I want to check my button, which is going to move my group up in the scene. And if I press the spacebar again, it's going to uncheck the toggle button. So on the toggle button, you do have check and uncheck, or you have this toggle check state. It's not obvious, but let me show you that here on the scene, on the buttons here, not on the debug buttons. So right now, if I just press spacebar once, it's going to check the button. If I press again, uncheck. So now imagine I did that just with my debug buttons at the bottom. It's easy to bring them in while I do my tests. I can still publish my experience as is. The buttons are not visible, and then I'm good to go. That's it for the session. We're going to jump into the Q&A. Feel free to ask any questions about these tips and tricks. And remember, there is a second session tomorrow. We'll have a look at a bit more advanced tricks, talking about web triggers, QR codes, interface assets, and text concatenation, and all that good stuff. So I hope you will join us tomorrow as well. Thank you.